Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of The Sauce. Continuing on NFL Week 5. Carolina on the road in Chicago for this one. Let's do it.
Welcome to The Sauce. The Sauce. Sauce. Hey, get the sauce.
All right, like I said, we got the Panthers on the road in Chicago for this one. Bears are laying 4. I even see a 3.5 open. So it looks like there's been some sharp action coming in on the Carolina side, buying this line down. Total sitting at 41 or 40.5. I see a 41.5 too. So anywhere in between 40.5 and 41.5, depending on your sports book. Let's take a quick look at the pie charts. And according to this data here, action's pretty split on this one. Just over 55% of the tickets, just over 50% of the money on the Chicago side. So maybe slightly coming in on the Bears side, but for the most part, this is looking like a 50-50 split. But as I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup. We'll start with some head-to-head history. Chicago has won 6 of the last 7. 6-1 in their last 7 games against the Panthers, but the Panthers have covered. Carolina's 4-2 against the number in their last 6, 3 straight unders. But let's talk about this matchup, and we'll start with the Panthers offense. As you probably guessed, these numbers aren't looking too great. 24th in yards per play, 25th in success rate, 27th in EPA, 26th in DVOA. But obviously, when we're talking about the Panthers offense, we got to split their season in half. We got weeks 1 and 2 with Bryce Young at quarterback. In those games, Carolina was averaging just 6.5 points per game, 4.1 yards per play, 30.1% success rate. Then we got weeks 3 and 4 with Andy Dalton at quarterback. They're averaging 30 points a game, 6.1 yards per play, 51.9% success rate. So night and day difference here. Obviously, we know the Panthers offense isn't as bad as it looked in weeks 1 and 2, and it's not as good as it looked in weeks 3 or 4. It's obviously somewhere in the middle there, but no question, making the quarterback change was a huge shift here for the Panthers offense. Even though they took a 10-point loss to the Bengals last week, the offense was still moving the ball, but wasn't really like we saw in the Raiders game. Andy Dalton actually didn't really have a great game throwing the ball. 25 of 40, 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick, and 83 passer rating. That's really not great, but Carolina was running it. Chuba Hubbard had a really nice game. Also, Miles Sanders got involved. Carolina as a team, 156 yards on the ground, 5.6 yards per carry, 53.6% rushing success rate in the game. So Carolina had the run game working, and honestly, I think that's something we're going to continue to see here. Now, I'm not saying I expect the Panthers to have some explosive rushing attack, but keep in mind, this is a really good offensive line. It's been a little banged up this year. They have 2 very good tackles. Damian Lewis missed last week. It looks like he might return. He's been participating in practice. Also, Robert Hunt's been banged up. I don't think he actually missed any time, but he's been listed as questionable the last couple of weeks. He's practicing as well. So it looks like we're going to see the Panthers offensive line at full strength here. This might be a halfway decent rushing attack. Now, as I'm recording this, I'm noticing that this graphic says Bryce Young. Probably for when you're editing it, please change it to Andy Dalton. So we're most likely going to see a healthy Carolina offensive line. And like I said, they've done a good job this year. Look at their numbers creating space in the run game. It hasn't been great, but certainly not bad. 8th in adjusted line yards, 17th in run blocking grade, 23rd in yards before contact. And that's an area Chicago has struggled with. The Bears' defensive front has been pretty good in pass rush, but look at their run defense numbers. Just 20th in line yards, 22nd in run defense grade, 26th in yards before contact. We just saw them play the Rams. Kyren Williams had been struggling to get it going this year. He was making plays against the Bears on the ground in that game. And if you pull up the Bears run defense numbers on the year, I mean, you can see it. The Bears defense as a whole has some nice looking numbers. Look at the bottom of this graphic against the run. 19th in yards per carry allowed, 17th in success rate, 18th in EPA, 30th in run defense DVOA. The game against Houston was pretty much the only time we've seen this Bears run defense look good. They held the Texans to 76 yards on the ground, 3.6 yards per carry. In their other 3 games, they're allowing 138 rushing yards per game on 5.1 yards per carry. So no question this Bears run defense is a bit of a concern, and after seeing what Chuba Hubbard did last week against the Bengals, the Panthers were running the ball, you might be thinking, hey, Carolina's going to run the ball in this game. Well, hold on. The Panthers do a lot of zone blocking in their run game. 61.2% of their rush attempts this season have been zone concept. That's fourth most in the NFL. Why is that significant? Because the Bears' run defense, although it struggled this year, they're struggling much more with gap concept rush attempts. Look at their numbers against zone rushing. 10th in the NFL in yards per carry allowed, 7th in success rate allowed. So although I do think Carolina will have a run game moving forward as long as their offensive line is healthy, and I don't think this Bears run defense is very good, I don't particularly like the matchup for the Panthers here. I don't know if the run game is going to be there. Now, what about Andy Dalton? Are the Panthers going to be able to throw the ball in this game? Well, we previously mentioned that the Bears pass rush has been good this year. 10th in pressure rate, 9th in pass rush grade. The Bears defensive front has a couple question marks on it, but they're both practicing. I expect both Dexter and Montez Sweat to play in this game. So the Bears pass rush should be at full strength here. But the Carolina offensive line, like I mentioned before, it's pretty good, and they've done a good job in pass protection this season. 12th in pressure rate allowed, 2nd in pass blocking grade, 11th in adjusted sack rate. As we know, Andy Dalton is getting up there in terms of age, but even at this age, you give him a clean pocket, he is able to make the throws. So I think Panthers pass protection should give him some opportunities to do that, even though the Bears pass rush should make some plays as well. But here's the thing. This Bears secondary might be really good, and I don't necessarily like the matchup here for Andy Dalton. First of all, the weakness in terms of depth for the Bears secondary has been defending the intermediate pass. They're 28th in DVOA against that pass. But look at Andy Dalton's numbers. That's his least effective passing depth. Just 16.7% of his throws have been intermediate passes so far this year. So, I mean, that's a start. That's something. Also, Bears run a good amount of zone coverage. Most of the Panthers wide receivers are man beaters. Deontay Johnson, as we know, dating back to his days with the Steelers, much more effective against man coverage. I mean, there's no Adam Thielen. I don't know. So Andy Dalton may have some time to throw. Maybe the Panthers offensive line is able to neutralize the Bears pass rush a little bit, but I still don't like the matchup. So as a whole on this side, it's not necessarily that I think the Panthers offense is terrible. I like the matchup for the Bears defense. I think it's going to be a real struggle for them to move the ball in this game. Now, what about the other side of the ball? Let's talk about the Bears offense, and good Lord, these numbers. How does this team have 2 wins? They're 31st in yards per play, 24th in success rate, 25th in EPA. Look at their run blocking numbers. 29th in adjusted line yards, 26th in run blocking grade, 31st in yards before contact. So yeah, everyone was talking shit about DeAndre Swift, calling him terrible. He hasn't gotten much help from the offensive line, and he did just have a good game, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the offensive line hasn't created a ton of space in the run game, so that's important to mention. The first 3 games of the season, Chicago was averaging 73.3 rushing yards per game as a team, just 3.1 yards per carry, 29.6% success rate on their rushing attempts. But then last week, they finally got it going. 133 yards on the ground, 5.1 yards per carry, 42.3% success rate. Now, you might be thinking, Kyle, who cares? It was against the Rams defensive front. It's the youngest, most inexperienced defensive front in the NFL. But here's the thing. They're playing the Panthers, so it's not like, oh, now they have a huge step up in competition. The Panthers defense has been pretty terrible. 26th in yards per play, 28th in success rate, 28th in EPA, 24th in DVOA. Their numbers against the run certainly aren't great. 20th, 24th, and 25th. So it's not like the Bears see this huge jump in competition here. And we were just talking about how the Bears offensive line is struggling to create space in the run game. Well, look at the Panthers defensive front. They've been getting blown off the ball. 29th in adjusted line yards, 25th in run defense grade, 27th in yards before contact. The only time we've seen this Carolina run defense look decent was in the Raiders game. They allowed just 55 rushing yards, 3.4 yards per carry in that game. But look at their run defense numbers in their other 3 games. Over 181 rushing yards allowed per game, 5 yards per carry in those other 3 games. So I know as a whole, this Bears rushing attack has looked pretty bad this year, but it looked good last week, and I think against a bad Panthers defense, I think they're going to be able to run the ball again. Now, what about Caleb Williams throwing the ball? Well, as I'm sure you know, the first 2 games of the season, even though they won one of those games, it was really bad for Caleb Williams. Just 133.5 passing yards per game, 4 yards per pass attempt. Definitely looking better as of late. In his last 2 games, 260 passing yards per game, 65.6 success rate per dropback is very good. 7 yards per pass attempt, 94.5 average passer rating. Okay, starting to look decent here, Caleb Williams. And now he's matched up against Carolina. What do we know about the Panthers defense? They run an assload of zone coverage, 79.2% zone frequency this year, 4th most in the NFL, and they run a ton of cover 3. 52% cover 3, most in the NFL. No NFL team this year has run more cover 3 than the Carolina Panthers. Now, when you pull up Caleb Williams splits against man coverage and against zone coverage, there's not a night and day difference here. Yes, the yards per attempt against zone is much better. EPA is much better. Passer rating is about the same, maybe a little worse. So the numbers don't really jump off here. But we just mentioned how Caleb Williams is coming off his best 2 games. Here are the numbers right here. I'll pull the graphic back up. Why is this significant? Those games were against the Rams and the Colts, 2 teams that run a lot of zone coverage. Now he's matched up against the Panthers, who run even more zone coverage. So even though his splits against zone coverage and man coverage don't look that insane, his 2 best games were against defenses that run a lot of zone coverage, and now he sees a bad defense that runs even more zone coverage. So what does that add up to? I think Caleb Williams is going to make some plays. I like the matchup for the Bears offense. I think they can throw the ball. I think they'll be able to run the ball again as well, like they did last week against the Rams. Don't really like the matchup for the Panthers offense. I know every single sharp and professional bettor, they're all going to be taking the Panthers here. The line movement is indicative of that. It's dropped from 5.5 down to 3.5, or it's mostly at 4 now. I don't care. I disagree. I'm on the other side. I think the Bears win by a touchdown plus, so I'm going to be on Chicago in this one. I haven't bet this yet. This line continues to drop, so why would I place this bet now? Maybe we'll even get a 3, but I would play it right now at that 3.5 that's open. So for this video, Bears minus 3.5. If you're looking for something to take right now, take Bears minus 3.5. Maybe it continues to drop. Maybe it doesn't. But I think Chicago's the move here. I think they win by a touchdown plus. If you'd like to see all the bets I have open, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on open bets. You'll see all mine as well as everyone else on the staff here. Also, if you sign up to Sauce Network Plus, it comes with access to the Discord, and you can participate in the weekly betting league. $150 on one of these trophies go to the winner every single week. So if you're interested, head over to the website and sign up. Let's have ourselves a nice week 5 here. We got off to a great start with the Falcons-Bucks over. That was that one cashed pretty much in the first half. NFL's been really good to me so far this season. Hopefully that continues. Wish I could say the same thing for college football, though. But hey, this is an NFL video. We'll keep it positive. NFL's been great, so hopefully that continues. Please remember to bet responsibly. Talk to you in the Discord.